Hello and welcome back to the Marketing Chat Room. I am Kayla Bryant here today with Amy Klein. Super excited to have her on to chat about all things social and community and specifically data related. So it should be a really fun chat. Amy Klein is Senior Manager of Social Media at Farm, which is a digital marketing agent or a marketing agency based out of Buffalo, New York. We were just talking about how cold it is there.
It's always cold.
So welcome, Amy. Super happy to have you. And if you could just enjoy yourself for the guests.
Sure, I'm so happy to be here. So, like you said, I work at a marketing agency, which has allowed me to work with such an amazing variety of clients. And I realized while working with the clients throughout my career that as much as I thought that I would hate numbers my whole life, I was not a math person. Data really has been the key to growing community on social media. And once I kind of figured out how to leverage the numbers to actually um, use the insights to engage community, I've just seen some really incredible results. And I'm so excited to talk about it with your followers so that they can do the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that data is really important to a lot of marketers and a lot of marketing teams and just businesses in general. But I think that we can sometimes get a little bit lost in the data of things. So
Yeah,
I'm excited to hear your experience and insights and kind of how that you've learned to navigate the data to help it inform your practices.
of course. Yeah.
Awesome. So jumping right in, we were talking about how you say every post is a data point. So how has this kind of mindset changed the way that you lead content strategy?
This is a really big piece of the strategy. So I think it's really easy when you're leading a content strategy or just somebody who's creating content in general to very much get hung up in the content that you're posting. You pour your heart and your soul and your expertise into every single post. So you want to see every post skyrocket. It's like your little babies. You want to see them do wonderfully. But oftentimes, or I shouldn't say too often, hopefully, sometimes the posts underperform. And if you're looking at it in that kind of way of it's kind of your identity is hung up in it of I created that content, then it can be really hard when you see an underperforming post. But if you kind of flip that script and you say, this is just a data point, you can instead learn something from that post. So you could say, okay, this post didn't do well as I expected to. Why? What happened? How can I use what happened here to strengthen my strategy overall? Um, I like to say that you can't ever change anything based on just one data point. So you need a few grouped together in order to actually find some trends. So I conduct monthly reporting. And one of the things that I do is I look at the higher performing posts and the lower performing posts, and I group them into two different categories. And then I look at the higher ones and I say, okay, what are the commonalities in these higher performing posts? And maybe it's the post type, maybe it's a certain tone that you used in the copy or a position that you used to hook somebody. Maybe it's what was in the visual. If you find those different commonalities, then you can say, all right, with this grouping of data points together, these are the things that are really working. And you can do the same with the lower performing posts. So if you group those together and you say, okay, so maybe this post type isn't really working for us, or we tried the CTA and people aren't quite responding. And you can say, okay, so those data points are telling us that we should move away from that strategy and lean into the higher performing strategy. Then, when you create your next content calendar, you incorporate those points and you see how it goes. And in my experience, your strategy just gets stronger from there.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm sure that it's really unique for each brand too, because I mean, if not, you'd be a billionaire, right? You've got the
Yeah.
secret formula. You
Yeah.
just sell that to everyone.
So I love to say that it's not necessarily what the numbers are saying, it's the story behind the numbers. And what the story behind the numbers is what your audience actually wants. you start with your best guess. That's all you can do is you could start with your most informed guess based on your experience, but from there you really need to tweak to what the audience wants. And I've had the audience really humble me before, very much, but in the end, if you're listening to them, you're succeeding. So there's that.
For sure. Yeah, I think that audience point is something that a lot of brands kind of miss, which is funny because the audience is the whole point. But really you could copy paste this strategy that works super well for brand A over to brand B and just has a completely different effect because of who the audience is.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And what they're expecting from the brand themselves.
Yeah, for sure. Do you even look at metrics as granular as like time of day that you've posted the content or day of week?
I do. So it's really hard not to get lost in the metrics. So there's a certain point where you have to kind of like pull yourself back from that. But generally speaking, if I'm looking at the group of high performers or the group of low performers, I when I see that, I'm like, okay, well, why did this post do well? Or well, what happened to this post that it didn't do well? Like all of these things are wonderful about the post, but it still underperformed. So usually time of day or day of the week is um one of the last things I'll look at, but sometimes when it's just like, but all of these other things are awesome, what didn't go right? It could be one of those things. And actually, we found for a couple of our clients who were posting around holidays that the time of day was big. So if they posted later in the day, specifically on holidays when they're talking about the holiday, the posted or they were not high performers. But if they posted right at the beginning of the day, they did a lot better. And the kind of thinking behind it is that at towards the end of the day, people have seen like a billion posts about, Mother's Day, Father's Day, whatever the holiday is. But towards if the beginning of the day, they're still kind of excited about how the new holiday. So there are times where it definitely does come into play.
That's so interesting. I've never thought about it that way, but yeah, you're right. There's so much information coming at us all the time when we're scrolling through any platform, really, that makes sense if you're kind of one of the first to be on, I guess, either a trend or a topic or wishing someone a happy holiday, then it would
Absolutely.
resonate a little bit better. Awesome. And then we also wanted to talk about a feedback loop and kind of how that plays in to the social world and what a strong feedback looks like in practice.
Sure. So I definitely see data as a piece of a loop or a point in a feedback loop, as opposed to like the end of a road. I think a lot of people look at your data and your reporting like the final step or the end of your content cycle. Um, and they'll approach it in a little bit more of a, okay, this is what I did. Did it work? Did it not work? Whereas when I approach it, there is an element of that. Did it work? Did it not work? But then there's also and how can I use this information to strengthen my next step? On social or really in any content creation role, whether it's a blog or email, anything like that, it's cyclical. You're not going to do it once and be completely done with it. You're going to keep doing it over and over again. So if you use all of the information that you've already gathered, you can actually strengthen your future strategies so that you kind of don't make the same mistake twice. It's also super helpful on social platforms that are constantly updating or that trends are constantly changing. Because if you're using it as a point in the cycle, you're staying on top of those changes and you're making sure that your content is always evolving with those changes and you don't find yourself months or years down the road doing something just because that's kind of like what you've always done.
Yeah, totally. It's always interesting to see brands that are like late to a trend where they just kind of keep doing the same thing over and over that you've seen other brands do, and you're like, that doesn't really That doesn't really resonate with me.
No, I actually worked with somebody, um, and I had created these posts around a content series that they did, of blogs, articles on their website. And I created posts for them, and the feedback I got was, no, really, what we do is we do like a sentence to tease the blog, and then we put the link there. And I was like, oh my goodness, that was best practices like years and years and years ago. Like you
Yeah.
gotta keep up. So there's a bit of an education element in that too, but you really do have to keep evolving, or else you're gonna fall behind very quickly.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense that it's a loop that kind of keeps going and going, and using data to inform your upcoming posts makes a lot of sense as well. That's what we do on like the paid digital side also, of course. Like we're going to
Mm,
take the data and keep feeding it into the future campaigns, because if you're just using it as like, here you go client, like this is what we did this month. This ad performed really well. This one didn't perform as well. Like good to know, but like what are you going to do with that to kind of keep that cycle going?
exactly. Don't make the same mistake twice.
Mhm. Absolutely. Um, and then on that note, with data and community, I know that there's a tie between the two. How do those work together in a positive way?
So I kind of was saying in the beginning that I never thought that I would have anything to do with numbers. I actually like I really hated math. Um, this is my I dropped out of pre-calc twice because I was just not into it. Stats I ended up loving because there was a lot of words involved in stats, which I think kind of eventually got me into the world that I am right now. But what data can tell you is what your community is kind of voting on. So I see engagements or even impressions as like votes on a post. So you will get that qualitative feedback from your followers when they comment. And there's definitely different social listening you can do for sentiment and everything like that. But the actual comments themselves are votes on a post. It made them feel something enough that they wanted to take the time out of their day to comment on it. And let's be honest, there's so many things on the internet right now that they could be doing instead that it's showing that your post connected with them. Same for interactions, like engagements or like likes, comments, and shares. The shares, I would say, will give you the highest value. That's not just saying like, yes, this resonated me, but it's this resonated with me so much that I want to show it to somebody else. Somebody else needs to be in on this with me. So engagements are votes, but all votes are not created equal on social media. So what you can do when you're doing your reporting is you actually can look at the data and look at the votes and figure out what are the topics that people are voting on. What are the content styles that they prefer? All of those metrics can feed into those observations, and you can actually use that to shape your strategy a little bit more. So if all votes are not created equal, your likes are not going to be as valuable as your comments or your shares. You can look at what, so maybe this one got more engagements, maybe this video got more engagements, but they're all likes. But this carousel over here got a ton of comments, and maybe it was shared more widely. So if that happens again, we don't make any major decisions based on one data point. But if we start to see a trend that maybe videos are getting more of the likes and the carousels are getting more of the comments and the shares, we might start leaning in more towards um, carousel content and sharing more of that. And I can actually give you a real world example of a time that I did this, and it was so helpful. So we were working with a consumer brand, and they were launching a new product. In the months leading up to the launch, I implemented my reporting system with the whole cyclical feedback loop, and I focused on the comments because I wanted to be able to then get in and start engaging with the community. So, what I was doing is I was using the data to create opportunities that I could engage as the brand. And when I started engaging as the brand, I made sure that I was talking to them like a friend at a bar, which is very on brand for this particular company. So I was responding in GIFs sometimes. I was, um, if somebody tagged a friend in on a post and didn't say anything else, I might respond with like the eyeball emojis and like say and tag them as well and say, what do you think or whatever, just being very playful and making sure that I had the opportunities to be playful as the brand. I really focused on building that community and it was working. Finding the content that people liked. They loved quizzes and Instagram stories. So we did a lot of quizzes and Instagram stories. And when it was finally time to launch the product, the campaign around the launch, saw a 6,603% higher engagement rate than the benchmarks we were using of the other like similar brands.
Wow.
Um, yeah, it was one of those things where I had to rerun the numbers because I wasn't 100% sure that I did it correctly in the first place. But that's what happened. And when it happened, I was getting feedback. What did we do in this campaign that was so much better? Um, can we recreate this? Can we do it more? And I love the thinking of can we recreate it and can we do it more? But I was like, yes, we can. But it wasn't just the campaign that got the numbers. It was all of the community building and using the data to create the opportunities to build the community that kind of primed the profile to see those numbers uh, for the campaigns for the launch, because the launches are always going to do better than just kind of the day-to-day content, like they just always are. So there's
Of
kind of
course.
that innate little boost, but with focusing on the community, you lifted it up a little bit more so that when it boosted, it started from a higher point. So, yes, numbers, they can seem cold and logical, but if you use them right, you can really figure out how to create connections with them.
Yeah, what a cool story. That sounds really, I mean, intentional and strategic, as well as just kind of fun and engaging.
Yeah, it's really fun when the two work together, when the data and the community work together. You can have a good time.
Yeah, I love that. I think a lot of us think of just like numbers as kind of boring and static and useful, of course, but like just I don't personally get the impression like, oh yay, exciting, fun.
I I have a joke with all my clients. We do reporting every month, and I get on the call and I'm like, it's data day, everybody's favorite day. And it started off with them rolling their eyes at me, but I try to make it fun, so now they're in on the joke with me.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I love how you talked about the metrics as like people voting toward this, certain different ways of voting on the content that a brand is putting out there. That's really interesting and does kind of remove it from like, you're the social media manager, you have a lot of investment in this particular piece of content. It's kind of nice to think of it as like just it's a vote on, what they want to see more of, what's interesting and relevant to them. And I know metrics have also shifted over time, kind
Yes.
of away from likes and toward shares. And when you think about it, it is really valuable to get a share or even a like these days. I feel like
Yes.
people like I don't even like that many things on social because we just see so much content all the time. It's really normalized. Whereas before it was like, a decade back, it was like, wow, a photo, how cool. But now it's really
Yeah.
just so oversaturated. You really do have to think about it as like, okay, people are like intentionally sharing this with someone else, like that actually means a lot.
It does. It really, really does. To get somebody, I would say, like, we're in the age of the lurker on social media, but to get somebody to actually stop passively consuming and actually actively engage in your post is the best thing that can happen because it's really building and strengthening the relationship between you, your brand, and them.
For sure. Yeah. And I mean, I see a lot of, obviously, there's a lot of engagement on like a giveaway type of post naturally because you have to
Yes.
engage to enter the giveaway. But when it's something other than that, that's like really special.
Yes, really. And I think that's why people really talk about creating relatable content or content that makes people feel seen. Because when you feel seen, when you can relate, that's the content that's going to end up in the group chat. That's what people are going to be talking about and sharing because you really just got to the heart of it.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. Um, let's see. Okay. Underperforming posts. We've talked a little bit about this, but what's the value? And let's say someone spends a whole lot of time, puts a lot of effort into creating something that they thought was going to do really well, and it just kind of didn't live up to that expectation.
Underperforming posts are hard. And I'm saying this, from experience because you want everything just to knock absolutely everything out of the park. But it's not always going to happen. Sometimes you're going to guess wrong. Um, so a few things you can do about underperforming posts. And the first thing I'm going to say is going to be the hardest, and that's just take yourself out of it. It's not a reflection of you at all, especially when you pull back and look at the content performance as a whole. Um, so taking yourself out of it and trying to be as objective as possible is really going to be a difficult but important first step. Because then after that, you're going to just figure out what went wrong. And like we talked about a little bit at the beginning, I really like to group them up so that I can see trends. Because there have been times where something that tends to do really well has done poorly for me. And I've really just been like trying to pick it apart what went wrong. And it's usually not the thing that I thought would do really well. Let me give you an example to illustrate this because I think that the jumble of words I said was just a little bit confusing. So, um, we have a client, and one of the things that does really, really well on their profiles are um, like video slideshows almost, which you would think that that doesn't do well, but they're B2B, it works. So, and they have their architecture, they're beautiful, they're stunning designs of their building products. So especially on Pinterest, having just slideshows of photos to the beat of the music does really, really, really well for them. Now, they had one post that was like that underperformed. It did not do well, and they shared a similar post that was a carousel with pictures of the same build, so same beautiful pictures, but it was a carousel. And when we were looking at it, we're like, okay, so in this isn't like the carousel did better than the video. And then they scrapped all of their videos. And I was like, no, don't scrap them all based on the one post. It was just this one project. So, we are working on getting the videos back in because they have performed really well. But that's why I say to group it up because honestly, was it the fact that it was a video, or was it because of the time that it was posted, or the way the copy was written, or the first image that did or didn't hook somebody in the feed? There are so many different factors that could have come into play. But when you group it up, you can kind of rule out the different factors and kind of rule in other factors. So maybe it was time of day, or maybe it was the hook just wasn't doing its job. When they're all together, you can see the commonalities and it's a lot easier. So don't ever make a decision based on just one post.
That totally makes sense. And then when thinking about like content formats and content types, how do you, or do you have a process for kind of like testing a new content format for a brand or a client?
Yes, and it really comes with the reporting. So if we have a new content format, and this is going back a couple of years, but I'm thinking of when LinkedIn introduced the document posts that you would share as carousels. Um, when we started working with those, and we wanted to test if it was a better option, we would take a few different posts in a calendar that were similar. So we're not going to share the exact same ones to the LinkedIn profile because we can't A/B test like you could with paid, but they're on similar topics. And we did some as the carousels and some were just graphics. And we then looked at which the grouping of the carousels and the grouping of the graphics and which KPIs were higher. And we did that and we noticed the carousels were significantly higher, like 3 times higher when it came to engagement. So we immediately knew that we should go over to carousels. There have been times where it's not quite as um, it's not there's not quite as big of a difference, and in that we might then do it for a little while longer to get a bigger set of data, but most of the time you'll be able to pick and choose. And then with other topics, so for example, those might have been thought leadership posts, but then we have maybe event posts, and with those we might do a carousel versus a photo gallery and see if there's any difference there and then make the decision from there. For us, with event posts on the ones that we've tested, those do about the same. So it's a toss up. We might do a photo gallery, we might do a carousel. Some of it'll have to do with what pictures and graphics we have to share, but um, the testing process is the same across platforms.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. That makes sense too. Um, okay, last question before we sign off. Um, you talk about how reporting should feel creative, like reporting should feel like a part of the creative process. So kind of how do you marry creativity with reporting without kind of killing the vibe with the numbers?
I totally could see how the numbers can kill the vibe. I think of the numbers as a story. I love stories. And so instead of thinking the numbers as numbers themselves, I try to look kind of behind the numbers at what is the story that the numbers are telling. So let's say a post gets a ton of shares. What is causing those shares? Let's group that post in with other posts that got a lot of shares. What story are these telling us? Is it telling us that our customers are feeling seen and they are relating to the product? Is it telling us that they want to learn more? And how can we then take those insights and use that in the strategy? So that's kind of how we take the insights and use them in the strategy is a little bit of the creative part because then you're like, okay, so I said this once. What are all of the other ways that I can say it? If it's a specific topic that people are really resonating with, okay, cool. So we did a carousel here. How can we break this up into a video series? What sorts of insights can we get with LinkedIn polls to really draw in engagement? How can we add this to Instagram stories or break it up into threads? So that's really the part where once you see what is working, what those commonalities and trends are, how can you then take that and leverage it and maximize it in your upcoming strategy? And that's where I get real excited and real interested um, in that part of the process.
Yeah, totally. That is fun to think about, like how are different ways I can kind of repackage this concept and reshare it creatively. I know with my content, I always feel like I've already said this same thing, right? And I don't know how accurate this statistic is. It's probably a little outdated, but I've heard that only like 10% of your audience sees your content like the first time you post it.
Yeah, it's something like that, but it's such a small portion of people that see it. And honestly, I've seen posts on similar topics do if it does well the first time, it does well the second time. I've even personally engaged with posts that were just straight reshares, and I was like, I know I've seen this meme before, but I still love it, so I'm sending it to all of these friends because
Yeah.
it still hits. So it's okay to repurpose and reshare, and just freshen it up or pivot it, tweak it a little bit to make it work for now.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, as a consumer, sometimes I'll see something and I'll just scroll past it and then later think like, "Oh, I hope I see that again," because like I actually was interested but just didn't stop scrolling in that moment or whatever.
I've done that too. I'm definitely
Yeah.
guilty of that too.
It usually does. The algorithm usually does bring it back to me at some point.
It's a benevolent algorithm.
Yeah, it is. It is. Awesome. Well, Amy, before we sign off, anything else you want to share? Any last minute pieces of advice?
Oh, honestly, just if you have a growth mindset about your strategy, you can really use the data to um, make some incredible changes and adjustments, and you'll only get stronger when you're using it.
I love that. Well, thank you again so, so much for joining today. I loved our chat. I know I'm going to share it with our social content team. I think that they'll find a lot of value in what you shared today.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Thank you. Bye.